about tools and assessments that can help you develop your team. So this is a topic that Sasha and I spend a great deal of time talking about because we both have had experience with different assessments and how they are supportive and ways in which sometimes they aren't necessarily as helpful as you might want them to be. And so we're going to break down some of the ones that we use most often. And we're open to any questions on that, on the whys of that. We're also going to talk a little bit about how assessments can be really helpful in identifying some areas that you can focus on to help people grow and change, areas that can be used to for teams, for developing more strengths. So people who are working together or for people that are working together who maybe don't share the same strengths or the same communication style. When there's information and knowledge, when people understand what they bring to the table and what other people bring to the table, they can leverage that to exponentially more effective and exponentially stronger. So for me, one of the assessments that's been helpful to me has been the DISC profile, and we're going to go deeper into what that is. But I want to talk about why it's been helpful for me. And it might surprise you the why. It was helpful for me to understand that I am very action-oriented. I am very, oh, thanks. Thanks whoever just muted, appreciate it. I'm action-oriented, I'm results-oriented. I don't love getting into the details, right? I want to speak my truth, say what's on my mind and move on. What's been helpful to me in understanding that is when I am under stress, that becomes a liability because I flex that muscle too much, right? When I am under stress, I might fight harder to get my point heard and not hear the other people in the room. I might want to take action too fast on things without giving it a pause, without breathing through it and thinking about when I'm going to put it into play. So my business partner, Sasha, is not a D. I can't remember exactly what you asked, Sasha, but I know it's around the concrete sequential, asking questions, wanting to do research and get more information on things. And it's been very helpful because left to my own devices, I'm going to be taking action, taking action, taking action, taking action. And that is not always the right course. So, Sasha, why don't you share just a little bit about your experience with how assessments have supported you?
So Beth, it's so interesting. I've had this long corporate career before we started working together. And I would say that what happens is that at a certain point, the manager, the leader, whatever, gets like, oh, things are just not going well. I know what I'll do. I'll have everybody do an assessment. And so they'll trot out some trainers and, everybody will do Myers-Briggs, or they'll do Enneagram, or they'll do strengths, or they'll do DISC. And everybody will be like, wow, I am a such and such. That explains everything about me. And that explains everything about you. And everybody is fascinated for about 5 minutes. But then it's dropped like a hot rock, right? So people are left with the resonance of these assessments, but they're never actually used in a way that is supportive or as in a way that actually helps accomplish the goals of the organization. Now, in 2009, excuse me, one of my friends on Facebook was like, I am just obsessed with StrengthsFinder. And I'm like, what is StrengthsFinder? What's that? I want to know what my strengths are. So I found the book, and there's an assessment in the book that you get. If you pay for the book, you get it. And I took it and I was like, oh, these are things that I've always suspected about myself. How interesting. So I read it and I was fascinated by it. I kind of put it away, but I kept on remembering the things that the assessment said, things about what my natural talents and inclinations were. And I actually started to work with it. I started to work with it. And where that led to me was I stopped taking classes in technology. Stopped trying to be a technologist. My strengths are in human relations, 100%. All my top 5 strengths are all about human relations. And I knew I always wanted to be a coach, but I had always kept on talking myself out of it, like, oh, there's no future for me there. I'm in a technology career. I should just double down, improve my skill set and make this thing work. But when I started to look at it, I realized that I was never going to be the best technologist. I knew I was never going to have my flashes of brilliance in technology. And where I feel the most flow, resonance, and service in my life is because I started following what my talents were and developing those. And so I would say that for myself, doing StrengthsFinder was a life-changing experience. But I also was like kind of on my own, right? I was just like, okay, I know this about myself and it's up to me to go and do something about it. And what I have known since I became a strengths coach, by the way. I became a strengths coach like a few years ago before Beth and I started working together.
Mhm.
And what I learned through my training was that while this is super powerful for individuals, it's exponentially more powerful when applied to an organization or even just a team, because people learn how they can leverage others' talents and actually become their strongest team, their best team, how they can learn how to use talents to accomplish their goals, as opposed to like falling back to like, well, these are the steps for doing this. Well, if you have people who are talented in a particular way, those approaches may not work. I mean, I came from a team of program managers, and our 2 top talents were achievement, which is the doing of things, the completing of things, and relationships. So we did everything through how we had conversations with people, with how we made friendships with people, how we helped each other, and the fact that we had a lot of engine behind getting things done. So there was a lot of energy there. So that's what drove our team forward. Understanding that and seeing that kept us out of, like we had to manage certain things. We had to manage things like metrics. We had to manage things like, KPIs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we knew that our genius was in our ability to be in relationship and to drive action. So knowing that's about a team can turn your team into a powerhouse of genius, as opposed to people who are just trying to keep, chugging along, following a plan that's been set out that may not be appropriate for talent at all. I'm also a Myers-Briggs coach. And what I learned through Myers-Briggs, by the way, this is the first assessment I took like 30 years ago. A psychologist gave it to me. And I did the Myers-Briggs test and I learned things about myself. I didn't think about it very hard, but what I realized is that I had strong preferences towards things like intuitive thinking, things that had been, which is undervalued, right? Intuitive thinking, but it's actually, my ability to make connections and to see things. Introversion. I need judgment. I need structure, things like that. All those things I realized were important to me. And that when I was under stress, I would fall out of those kinds of, I would fall out of it and try to compensate by using things like logical decision making, which doesn't work for me because, putting things together, part by part, I've already made a leap, right? So anything I do with logic is a back end sort of thought. These sorts of things helped me understand myself. Now, when I saw it applied to a team, what it does is it helps people communicate with each other, because all of a sudden you realize that if you are expressing from your preference, like if I'm expressing intuitively to somebody who needs a lot of, lots of, steps and facts and, logical decision making, my intuitive communications are going to fall on deaf ears. So it helps me translate what I'm saying into words that can be heard, words that can be heard and appreciated and adopted by another person. And so that's the gold in Myers-Briggs, is it helps you communicate and understand with another person. If you're on a sales team and you're surrounded by extroverts, but you are that introvert, you're the person who needs to unplug at the end of the day, that idea of going to a client dinner is killing you. Now, if people understand that about you, guess what? During the day, they may give you time to go and take a breather, go and take a beat, go and spend some time alone, relaxing, before you can go and be with a client and have your juice up so that you can actually be engaging, because you've spent out, because your bucket's full and you can be there for other people, but you need to fall back into introversion so that your energy is managed again. Understanding these things allows you to help your colleagues be their best, to be on, to give them what they need, and to ask for what you need. So these things are wonderful lenses for you to see others through and to understand yourself. But they do not describe everything about a person. You are not your strengths. You're not your Myers-Briggs preferences. You're not your DISC assessment. It's like, while Beth is a very strong leader, she's also a tender heart and a poet and an artist. And those are the things that make up her whole humanity. She's not just a person who's just like, driven and powerful. She has a lot to her. I have a lot more to me. And while I'm cautious and I need to think through things, I'm also, I can also be strong and opinionated and directive too. It's just that the thing that drives me is different than what drives Beth, but we're full people.
Well,
so
that's
go
the
ahead,
risk
Beth.
sometimes, is that I see people who take one of these assessments, and I've put the names of the ones we're specifically talking about in the chat. But I've seen people who take one of these, and then when a conflict happens in a team or an environment or whatever, someone says, well, you know what, I'm just this. I can't help it. This is who I am. This is how I show up. So I also sometimes see it taken on as kind of a weapon or a way to not hold space in a conversation, or to be in a dialogue, or to be present in a conflict, right? Some people use it as a shield to hide behind. And that's the risk side of this. I'll tell you a really brief story about a nonprofit that the executive director asked me to come in. This is a few years ago, probably 5 now. Asked me to come in and help him because he wanted to fire his whole leadership team. Because every time he came with a big idea and something that he was energized and excited about, nobody would get behind him. Everybody questioned him. Nobody felt the passion that he felt. So I said, well, I have an idea. Why don't we do a little work with them first before you fire your whole executive team? It sounds like it could be a little crippling to the organization. We might want some information before you do that. And when we, part of the work we did, so we did the navigating challenging dialogue process, but part of it was we did an assessment on communication styles and leadership styles. And it turned out that he, in the paradigm, he was the outspoken leader, the passionate person, the one who wasn't interested in details. And his whole leadership team were people who wanted to know why. Have we done the research? What evidence have we seen? And and they wanted time to go back and process and then respond to his idea, right? And he was interpreting that as people who could not get behind him, could not support him. And so as we worked through this and we understood, and what was missing on his team was the person who was the connector, the influencer, the person who could hear the passion and then help interpret it for the people who wanted to ask the questions, know the context, and do the research, and could bridge all of that. That quadrant was totally missing on his team. It wasn't present. And so that gave him a lot more information besides, I'm just going to go out and start with a whole new slate of people. No, I'm going to work better with the people I have, and they're going to understand me better, and I'm going to understand them better. And so that's what we're talking about here. So Sasha, do you want to go into talking a little bit more about each of the profiles? And these are the profiles, the assessments that we work with most. There's a lot out there. There's some that we don't work with for specific reasons. And some people are really passionate about those particular ones, but they're not the ones that we've found to be the ones that we lean into. So we're going to talk about the ones that we work with and that we use with clients.
Yeah, I just want to add to something. You cannot do everything well, right? You cannot, do every assessment and do a good job of it. And what we have found is that when you can speak from your experience, when you can speak from the benefit of something, you can unlock the magic for other people. So, we have made a conscious choice to invest ourselves in assessment tools that we have experience with and that we have seen that works and that we have felt, the actual benefit of. So if I sound a little gushy, it's because they're my favorite things. I can't help myself. Just cannot help myself. So I took up Myers-Briggs, I think in like 2000, maybe 2015. And I'll tell you one thing about Myers-Briggs. This is a much maligned tool because people, this is the one that when people talk about pigeonholing, Myers-Briggs is the one that they're talking about most of the time. Like, oh, you're going to try to pigeonhole me with my, one of my the 16 personality types. It's like 4 different areas: introversion versus extroversion, sensing versus intuition. So sensing is like like what you see, hear, and feel in the world versus what you're intuiting, like the information that you're picking up that you can't necessarily put your hand on. Thinking versus feeling. So thinking is like, logic and reason and, and things that are more knowledge-based. Feeling is about what it is coming from your emotions, you feel sad, you feel angry, it's like you feel something about it. That is the difference there. And the last one is perceiving versus judging. And judging is about, I would say, real world structure, like time, things that are time bound, things that are, have logic, have like a process behind it. Perceiving is very open-ended. And so like, my wife is a perceiver. And so she is not thinking about time very much. I am the one who needs a schedule. I need a schedule. Otherwise I start to feel a little unhinged. I like to know when things are going to happen and what's going to happen. That's important to me. She's like, yeah, whatever happens, things are fine. They are preferences. And when we are in preference, we feel the lowest level of stress, right? When you are out of preference for too long, that doesn't mean I can't be perceiving. I mean, we have days when we do the perceiving thing all day long. I just take off my need to know what's going to happen next. And we have a pretty good time, but I can't do that all the time. I feel much better if I have a schedule. So knowing these things about yourself, you can actually, you can see, like if you're forced too much into extroversion when you're an introvert, or like, for people who have been sheltering at home who are extroverted, it was very painful. My sister-in-law is an extrovert, and being stuck at home for her, she was feeling pretty sad and melancholy because she gets her energy from people. She gets her energy from being around other people. I was not impacted that way. I'm a deep introvert. So being at home was not stressful in that way for me. But for others, it's very stressful because they do not have people that they can connect with, like go get hugs from them or, spend time with them, head to head, having a conversation. I can do without that for long periods of time and do fine, but that's like knowing these things about yourself. You can see how frayed you start to feel when you're out of preference. So this is one of the very valuable things about Myers-Briggs. Beth, do you have any, like anything to say about Myers-Briggs?
Myers-Briggs is one that I don't tend to not lean into, even though I believe it's really effective. And I think it's one of the most used of the assessments, particularly in the corporate world. There's only one reason I don't lean into it, because I am not a detail person. And every time somebody says, what kind of Myers-Briggs are you? I can't keep the letters straight. Like, I don't know, JTI, I'm not sure. It's a lot of letters for Myers-Briggs. And so Myers-Briggs, like any of these, when I ask, has your team done an assessment? Has your team done any of these? What most often I hear is people go, oh yeah, we did that a really long time ago. And I think I might have been, let me see if I can find the report. I haven't looked at that thing forever. And so that's not specific just to Myers-Briggs, but I find that the letters for me are tricky. They are not tricky for lots of people. So that's just my personal Myers-Briggs situation.
Yeah, Myers-Briggs is one of those things that when you're doing a real Myers-Briggs assessment, you are guided through it with a person who's trained in it, who can talk to you about your preferences and guide you through the report. I find it to be a really high quality report. It's something I really like and I believe in.
And I did not have that experience of being guided through it by high quality training. So it's probably,
so I'm thinking that you probably did not do an actual Myers-Briggs assessment.
And I'm thinking that I did, but that's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't do the program.
Yeah. So Beth, do you want to, you're the expert in DISC. Would you like to walk through DISC?
Well, DISC for me is interesting because it is 4 quadrants, right? So you may have seen the diagram for it. This is the D quadrant, the small I. I don't know why the I is small. That is the eternal question, why the I is small. The S and the C. And each quadrant has their own characteristics, but you can be in the middle on some, and it doesn't mean that you don't have the characteristics of the other quadrants. So when you do the DISC, you get a pretty hefty report. I think it's about 34 pages. And it tells you where your predominance is, what area that is. It also tells you the shaded areas where you have skills that you can deploy. You have muscles that you can flex as you need to. It also gives you sections on how you show up in conflict, how people who are in the other sections, God, I just totally lost that word, quadrants show up in conflict. And so I love to facilitate that within a team because it gives lots of information for people on how to approach people, how to communicate. So one of my big examples is when I send an email to someone, I type exactly what I want to say. How are you doing on the report? When are we getting the invoice? Whatever my question is, right? I type that, and now I have learned to go back and type a greeting and to type a salutation. I've learned that sometimes I need to provide context to what I'm asking, because if I don't, I'm going to get back, why? Why do you need to know this? What prompted this question? Not because the person is challenging my authority or challenging me in any way, because that is truly the information that they need to be able to proceed. So now when I put stuff out there, I begin to think in terms of all the quadrants. Some people need to connect emotionally in the beginning. Some people need to feel seen and heard. And some people like me, when they get an email that's too long and too many words and too much blah, 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 it's like, oh my God, get to the point. Just ask me the question. But as a leader and as someone who's communicating externally, I need to be thinking in terms of all of the quadrants. The fascinating piece for me with some of these is one that we haven't mentioned here, which is true colors, which I know there's some people on here who've done this work. Betsy Nash was certified in the True Colors work for years. And I did a little bit of True Colors work with organizations under her. And the thing I loved about that, which was always true, was the person who was the leader, the executive director or whatever, when they did the True Colors test, they usually had a rate, they scored really equally from all of them, because to be able to ascend in leadership, you need to be able to speak and show up and mirror the way of everyone in the organization to really be effective and to reach people. And so I loved that piece about that one. We didn't talk about that here because we don't, it's not something that we offer, but I have done that work, and I think that's also a great tool. So yeah, that's my DISC piece. Anything I missed on that, Sasha?
No, I just want to reinforce the fact that when you do DISC with your team, part of it is that you get educated on how you can help your team members who are different than you, right?
Yeah.
Learning, how, it's like Beth and I are like almost diametrically opposed in our profiles. The things we do to help each other, Beth knows I need more facts. I need to think about things more. And at the same time, I need to acknowledge her enthusiasm and her passion, and to let her know that she's heard, that I heard her. She's very, and to give a home for those flashes of brilliance and insight that she has, instead of saying like, oh, I have to, really pick this apart. But to be there, to let her know that she is seen and heard. This is important.
One thing I want to pop in and add that I meant to say is, if you want to understand and read a book that gives you, it's a fable, it's a story, a really good understanding of how to utilize the DISC in teams. Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, really teeny little book. I mean, it's so thin, it's designed to read, on a 4-hour flight maximum. And it's engaging, and it's an interesting story, but it walks you through how the DISC can support the growth and development of teams. You can get it on Amazon. You can probably get it secondhand. You can probably look on your bookshelf. You might even have it.
Actually, you can have us come in and actually work the 5 cohesive behaviors of a team.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
this is something that Beth and I started offering this year, is that we both really love that book, and we started looking at it because of the DISC work we do. But what we learned from the book is that really the key to a team is foundational trust, right? Yeah. It's something that we're expected to invest up front. But, part of the work that Beth and I do is about like talking about trust. It is built one conversation at a time and one behavior at a time. What the 5 cohesive behaviors of a team does is it gives everybody a chance to do an analysis of how they think the team is doing. And then you get a lens to see how much you see people actually trust the team, how much they hold each other accountable, and what are the things that are happening that are blocking them from actually, achieving goals. It is a very interesting lens. It's productive. And once people see the results, they're like, oh, we're so much better than that. But, the truth of the matter is this is all self-reported. It's not our assessment. It's not what we think about the team. It's what the team is reporting back. So the work there is to actually dig into how to build trust, how to hold people accountable, how to achieve those goals, all of those things. And the report is fantastic. It is one of the best tools that we offer. I love the 5 behaviors of, I love the 5 behaviors.
And the thing
Fantastic.
that I love the most about it is that then once stuff starts getting unearthed, and we had this experience with a high profile, high tech team, a lot of people would recognize the name, that this group, this leadership team within the organization, their self-assessment, it's like when you go to the doctor and the doctor says, how do you think your health is, and you rate yourself higher than what the tests show you really are. It's like the team anecdotally assess themselves higher, but then one person gets brave enough to make a statement like, I'm not speaking my truth because I'm afraid that people are going to think I'm dumb.
Right.
I'm afraid they're going to think I don't know what I'm talking about. And then the navigating challenging dialogue process allows us to facilitate that conversation in a really healthy way that helps the team move forward. And those are the watershed moments that move teams on the trajectory from performing well. This team, if they perform well, but now that they're able to actually speak their truth and listen, they are performing at a higher level than performing well.
Right.
So Sasha, let's talk about now CliftonStrengths. Or do you feel like you covered that?
Well, I covered a little bit, but it's like I could gush about CliftonStrengths forever, but I want to tell you something. CliftonStrengths changed my life.
Yeah.
Appreciating my talents and developing them into strengths changed my life. And I think that when people really understand what's great about them, and this is the foundation behind this, is like Don Clifton, when he early in his psychology career, he looked at the DSM and he's like, wow, look at this fat book that tells everything that is a psychosis, like everything that is, a disease of the mind and spirit. However, like, what's great about people? So he centered his work about discovering what's amazing about people. So there's 40 years of research in this. And, over the years, they broke it down into like 34 individual talent themes. And it's very hard to game this. Your talents are more or less static over time. I mean, maybe they bump up a little bit of one or another, but it's very hard to, this is not a thing that you can kind of like game. And it tells you where your greatest potential for genius is. Like those top 10 talent themes are the areas that if you put your shoulder to the wheel and really develop those, you develop your signature genius. And if you work in a team with this, the team's genius emerges. They call it the DNA of the team. It's what makes a group special. Our organization has a special DNA. And, I would like to say, I can say right now that, more than any place I've ever worked for, I see more of my brilliance emerging here. And I know that, the brilliance of, my partners, Andrea and Beth, that they are able to fully express what's great, what their greatest talents are. That's the thing that guides us in terms of developing ourselves. So if you have never taken the assessment, I encourage you, go get the book. It's an inexpensive book. The assessment is worth like 5 times the price of the book. Please go and take it and find out what's great about you. Find out what your talent themes are and learn how to develop them. And, consider bringing it into your company because it is a game changer. It is so good.
So for me, before Sasha and I started formally working together, she offered me the opportunity to take the Strengths Finder and then for her to do a debriefing coaching session with me around it. And what happened for me in that moment was, first of all, I was able to let go of shame around the things that I work really hard at and I don't necessarily do really well. And it helped me to identify what I needed to look for in business partners that would elevate everything that I was trying to do instead of me fighting my way through it. And it allowed me to trust that once I started working with those people like Sasha and Andrea who had strengths in areas I don't have, once we, because trust is built one conversation at a time and one interaction at a time. So once we went through the process of doing activities, having things happen, and me building trust in them, I was able to trust them more fully because I could say to myself, oh, wait a minute, Beth, stop working in an area that isn't your highest strength or skill or zone of genius, and trust Sasha with that, right? Listen to Sasha on this one. And so it really helped me have more ease as a leader and as a business owner because I knew I had reasons besides instinct on why to place trust, and I could stop laboring in vain in the areas where I don't have strength. And I get to learn from someone else leading in a specific area. I also, at the same time, am building my knowledge in that area. It may never be what I'm known for, like, as being an expert, but it's a place where I can build knowledge by partnering with someone else.
So that's assessments.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Super eager to hear what questions have we. I want to honor one thing. I want to take a minute to honor one thing right now, which is that questions were submitted. And a lot of them were not directly related to assessments, but I think for what's top of mind for people is how to develop teams, how to lead teams, how to move teams forward through all the not distractions, that's a discounting word, through all that's happening in the world right now. And so we're gonna delve into those questions towards the end. But first, if you have a question based on this, please enter it in the chat. And if you want to ask it privately, you can change that. You can hit the chat box and change everyone to Sasha or I and drop it in there, and we can grab it and we can answer it, without identifying you. So Sasha, have any questions come in through the chat for you so far?
Not through the chat. I just have the ones that are in the that were submitted in advance.
Okay.
So shall we start with those?
Yeah, why don't we start with those, and if as things come up for people, we can answer those.
Okay, so question number 1. How can we keep our energy up when creating the right work atmosphere? When creating the right work atmosphere has been a challenge. Okay, how do we keep our energy up when creating the right work atmosphere has been a challenge?
Yeah, that's interesting because for me, the deeper question, without knowing specifically the information, the deeper question for me is culture in an organization is what is. People try to hire us all the time to come in and create culture for their organization. You already have culture. Culture exists. Culture is the way people communicate. Culture is what the behavioral norms and expectations are that are explicit. And culture is also created by the predominant work styles, strengths, communication styles that are present on your team. Whatever has the most mass is what leads the culture. Trying to hold the culture up on your own or hold that motivating, inspiring environment up on your own is exhausting. It's exhausting. You can't do it, right? You can't. And so I would encourage you to begin having some dialogues on this. I would encourage you to, do the strengths finder for yourself. Maybe provide the strengths finder for your team. Talk with us directly, and let's just do a little assessment to identify where the gaps are, and ways in which you can. But my sense is that probably communication norms, expectations, how we show up, how we dialogue, how we be present in the workplace may or may not have been something that you've slowed down enough to work on.
All right. So, Beth, are you ready for the next one?
I'm super ready.
Super ready. All right. Do you have any strategies for managing a team across the political spectrum regarding COVID, protests, etc.?
I do. I do have some, I don't know if I have strategies, but I have some thoughts on that. One is that engaging with people individually with curiosity is just a pathway to helping people be seen and heard, right? When we try to tamp down, control, or contain everything that's happening in the world and keep it like outside the office container or the work container, people don't feel seen and heard, and they try and find ways to be seen and heard, right? To express it louder, stronger, harder. This is the best suggestion that I have for right now, and I want you to know that I'm a learner in this space as well. We all are. We're in a new place, people, and we are all learning as we go. But I would encourage you, if you're feeling tension in that way on your team, to spend some time with people individually, to ask them questions, to ask questions like, what would be helpful to you right now in this time? To let people know, I hear you. Hearing someone is different than agreeing, disagreeing, or having to change their mind. Just simply hearing them. Also, there's going to be things you're going to get, and I encourage you to go back in the replays. Andrea put up the replay link. You can go back and hear the replay of the answering unanswerable questions. Owning that you are not an expert in navigating this. That there are questions that are being put forward in all of our work environments that we do not have the answers to. How is this going to play out? What is going to be the impact? What is happening in the world? What does this mean for us? There are so many questions that are swirling for people, including me. And we talk about this internally, not all the time, but with some frequency, so that we can then be head down and move forward the things we need to move forward during the same time frame. But I would not, unless you are super skilled, I would not necessarily open up a group conversation to facilitate. I would be checking in with people one-on-one until I think a group conversation with people that have not been trained in navigating challenging dialogue, emotions can get high, things can get out of control, and you can be managing something that you may not feel ready to manage. So, but I would check in with people. I would ask curious questions. Yes, Meredith, I would do the things you learned in your training we had at your organization. Stay curious, ask questions, and listen. Yeah. Yeah. And stay in facts yourself. Remember what is true in this moment.
Okay. Ready for the next one?
I am super ready.
All right. Needs guidance on helping team members see their areas of growth.
No. Okay, I will assume next door does.
Yes.
And I'll about the one.
You, I think.
Okay.
No, I think you did it yourself. Good job.
I got it.
Thanks.
Okay, so repeat. Need guidance on helping team members see their areas of growth.
I'm curious if we answered that for folks. The thing that I definitely want to say about that, and this is something I learned from Sasha, is that a lot of times we think we see someone's potential and we want them to realize that potential, and we don't, that's not our business. We can inquire about it. We can acknowledge what we see. We can offer our feedback on where we believe they can grow. But when you get hooked into wanting them to grow in the way that you see they could, without having a dialogue about, does it land for them? Does it resonate for them? Is it what they want? Do they see a path forward? That builds anger and resentment. It builds disappointment. We become disappointed in people when we get hooked into what we believe is their potential without their buy-in. And so being able to talk about this through a coaching conversation is really critical, versus assuming what people's potential is and then trying to drive them towards that. That is an opportunity for disappointment and letdown. And I think next week's topic is coaching. Is that correct, Sasha?
I have to look at the agenda.
Yeah.
It is not coaching.
Oh, what is
it? It's not coaching.
No. Andrea says no. No, it's not.
It's not coaching. Let's take a quick look. What do we got on the docket? It is. Dun, dun, dun. We're gonna see my computer. Wait, here we go.
Oh,
shifting from being the expert to being the empowerer.
Yes, which is actually the lead in to the coaching conversation, then building coaching culture. So June 16th, shifting from being the expert to being the empowerer. I love that topic.
Yes. All right. Are we ready?
We are ready.
Okay. How do you raise awareness for the need to keep developing teams and your own skills during the pandemic?
So the pandemic is an awesome time actually to be building the skills of your team, because we're in a place we've never been before. And particularly if your team are people who are on the road, going out to work with clients, traveling quite a bit, people are actually more present, and people right now are experiencing some change that's being forced upon them. We've been doing the shelter in place thing now, most of us, unless you're essential, for a good period of time now. I think like almost 8 weeks. Yeah. And it takes that long to create new habit, right? To get comfortable with the uncomfortable. So your people are actually getting more comfortable with the routines, with the ways of working. And now is a perfect time with space. So how do you raise that, right? How do you raise that? You raise that by talking to leadership and talking to the people in your team about the fact that the organizations that are going to come out of this the strongest are going to be the ones that take this as an opportunity to develop skillfulness, to identify strengths, to build team cohesion during the pandemic. And if you go, we have a manager's toolkit, managing virtually toolkit on the website, and I'm hopeful that Andrea is going to pop the link into that. But you could go and see some things that we've developed specifically based on what clients are looking for to help build skillfulness during this time. But raising it around this is a phenomenal time to be building the skillfulness of your team because this requires skillfulness to navigate this time.
That is, you know, I can't even say this enough. The skills that you're learning to manage your team remotely are going to make you a much stronger manager when you're managing face to face. I don't know that any team is going to go back to being 100% in office, but the skills that you're learning right now to communicate, to connect, to collaborate, to perform when nobody can see each other are going to make you that much stronger when you're together. So, oh, and I see that Andrea popped that in the down in the messages. So awesome.
mcdsolution.com /toolkit. mcdsolution.com/toolkit.
Okay, we have one last question. Suggested tools and techniques to avoid hiring people who are emotionally volatile.
That's a tough one. That's a super tough one. Unfortunately, you can't use, and Sasha, correct me if I'm wrong, you can't really require someone take any of these assessments as part of the hiring process.
No.
It's not part of it. Sasha, I need you to help me on this because
okay.
I don't know how you can avoid hiring someone who's emotionally volatile. I'm not even sure what it means 100%.
So I want to say really clearly, the tools that we mentioned today are not hiring tools. In fact, most assessments that you run across are not hiring tools. You cannot make them you can't deploy one of these things to a potential candidate and then make a decision based on the outcome. So I want to just take that out of the mixture. As for, you know, whether or not a person is, you know, like how, you know, discovering if a person's emotionally volatile or not, that's just an area that is very subjective, right? It's subjective. I mean, if you screen well, you're screening people for how skillful they are, the kinds of problem solving they have gone through, and asking questions about like how they've dealt with scenarios in the past to get a window into how they are, how they deal with adversity, how they deal with interpersonal conflict, how they deal with these other things, and to have a variety of people screen them so that you get multiple points of view on these things, as opposed to just having one person saying like, yeah, they're good. You know, you can, but at the same time, you never know what a person is like until they've actually come into your environment. And then you find out, you know, how they really deal with adversity, right? And so at that point, they are in your work environment. You've invested in bringing them in, and you have choices. You choose to work with them and tell them this is what's required for the job. This is how we need for you to show up in the job. And you work from that point of view. But I have not yet come across any technique that you can screen people out on their emotional volatility if they have not in some way, you know, explicitly shown that to you during the hiring process. And even then, that's not necessarily a proof.
Right. And we have a free tool. I know a lot of you already know about it, but it's the Navigating Challenging Dialogue Primer. And it's free. It's 18 minutes. And I would encourage you to include that as part of your orientation package, your onboarding process for people to take that, because it teaches them how to self-manage, how to do some self-coaching around their emotional reactions, and it will support you to identify to people what is the culture and the behaviors that you desire. What are your expectations around people's emotional intelligence and their ability to self-lead and self-manage. Almost anybody can hold their emotions together, can self-manage through a series of 1 hour or half-hour interviews. And it's really tough because you don't know what's happening until you get them in the room, until you begin working with them. But also the culture you set up, the communication norms, the behavioral expectations that you educate people about in the onboarding process, set the tone for how your team is going to work together. And if you haven't taken time to do that work and be explicit and have buy-in, you end up dealing with that. People may end up trying to trigger them or get them to respond in that way. And it's a lot of work on the back end. So if you haven't begun doing the work to create your culture and set your tone and bring people into it, into something that's existing, I encourage you to think about doing that.
So Beth, that is it. That's our presentation for today. Those are the questions. And I want to direct people to the chat if you want to listen to this recording, and we'll also have a handout for this recording later, probably later today or tomorrow. You can go to ncdsolution.com/managing, and that's where we have the schedule for further discussions.
Yeah. So you can also go to the website, and you can sign up for next week's session, and you can pop your questions in there. We love spending this time with you. We're really appreciative that it's of benefit, and we look forward to talking with you soon.
All right. Thank you, guys. See you later. Bye.
Bye.